The chef do all. Help him.
Stop it.
Okay, do.
Stop. It's grossing me out. You can actually cook while I'm at work all day.
I think I should to return to Egypt now. Bye-bye. Love you too.
Thank you. In this moment, I'm so happy. I'm so happy. Well, are you ready?
For what?
Tomorrow's the wedding.
Oh yeah, I'm ready. You are
I'm
ready?
getting married tomorrow.
Tomorrow? What?
So it's going to be really, really quiet. It's going to be really, really small.
Does this mean we're not invited?
If Caden cannot be at my wedding, I don't see a wedding.
It's gonna be okay.
Mido finally said the 3 words Debby has been waiting almost this entire season to hear, I love you. Normally, that would feel like the romantic payoff she has been begging for. Except there is one problem. Almost immediately after getting that reassurance, Debby is preparing to marry him tomorrow. And suddenly, everything that worried her before seems to matter a lot less. This is the same relationship where Debby questioned whether Mido truly wanted her, wondered how much America and Hollywood were influencing his plans, watched him clash badly with her friends, and repeatedly struggled to get the emotional security she needed. Now Mido proposes, finally tells her he loves her, things stay peaceful for a few days. And Debby is acting like they have crossed into a completely different relationship. Meanwhile, her closest friends are not invited to the wedding. Her adult son has never even met the man she is about to marry. And when she realizes her son may have to work on the wedding day, Debby suddenly says she cannot imagine getting married without him. So I don't think the interesting question is whether Debby loves Mido. She clearly does. The question is much harder. Has Mido actually shown enough consistent change for Debby to trust him with a marriage? Or did he finally give her exactly what she had been emotionally waiting for? And the relief was so powerful that everything unresolved suddenly started looking smaller. Because feeling relieved by somebody and feeling secure with somebody can look very similar in a romantic moment. They become very different once the wedding is over. That cooking class date tells us a lot more about Debby and Mido than it first appears to. On the surface, everything looks light. They are cooking, joking around, eating together, and enjoying what should be one of their easier moments. But even during that relaxed date, Debby starts reaching for something she has wanted throughout this relationship. Reassurance. She wants to know whether Mido is happy. And Mido's response is interesting because his attitude basically seems to be, I propose to you. What more proof do you need? From his perspective, that probably makes perfect sense. A proposal is a huge action. He has made a commitment. He may genuinely believe his actions should already tell Debby what he feels without having to keep putting everything into words. But Debby does not experience love that way. She needs to hear it. She wants direct confirmation. She wants Mido to look at her and clearly say that he is happy, that he wants this relationship, and that he loves her. So when he finally does, Debby's reaction is not casual. She melts. And that reaction is important because this does not feel like she is simply hearing something sweet from her fiancé. It feels like she is finally receiving evidence. Evidence that Mido wants her. Evidence that this relationship is real. Evidence that maybe all those fears she has carried were unnecessary. And I understand why that would feel huge. When you have spent months wondering whether someone is emotionally where you are, finally hearing the answer you wanted can bring an enormous amount of relief. But this is exactly where Debby has to be careful. Getting the words you wanted is not automatically the same thing as getting the relationship you wanted. I am not saying Mido's I love you was fake. We have no evidence to make that claim, and I think reality TV commentary gets very lazy when every complicated person immediately becomes a liar or a manipulator. Mido can mean those words completely. He can genuinely love Debby, and they can still have major problems. Love does not automatically give you healthy communication. It does not solve money differences, family conflict, lifestyle expectations, career disagreements, or trust issues. It does not magically make two people compatible just because their feelings are real. Mido can love Debby and still be difficult for Debby to build a stable life with. Debby can love Mido and still overlook things because she desperately wants this relationship to reach the happy ending she imagined. That is why reducing this storyline to Mido is bad misses what is actually interesting. The bigger issue is how quickly Debby's interpretation of everything changes once she receives reassurance. The following morning, Mido is in the kitchen, and Debby is already looking at that like another sign of transformation. Now, maybe it is. Maybe Mido really is becoming more involved and more comfortable in their shared life. But I also think Debby is watching him very closely for proof that marrying him is the right decision. Mido is in the kitchen? That's progress. Mido says, "I love you." That's progress. Mido proposed. That's huge progress. And one positive moment after another starts building a story Debby desperately wants to believe. See, he really does want me. Everything really is changing. But here's the uncomfortable question. When someone has spent a long time emotionally uncertain, can ordinary positive behavior start feeling extraordinary simply because the expectations became so low? Saying you love the person you are about to marry matters. Being helpful around the home matters. Clearly telling your partner you are happy matters. But those are also normal parts of a serious relationship. For Debby, they appear to carry enormous emotional weight because she has not always felt secure enough to expect them. And that creates a very different question than whether Mido is suddenly becoming perfect. Maybe Debby is not witnessing some massive transformation. Maybe she is finally getting just enough reassurance to move forward. And those are two very different things. The engagement itself is where this pattern becomes harder to ignore. Their proposal did not come after weeks of calm conversations where both of them clearly worked through every concern and slowly arrived at marriage. It came through another emotional roller coaster. Debby believed Mido was leaving. She was devastated. Then suddenly the situation flipped and became a proposal. Again, I am not saying Mido intentionally designed some emotional manipulation cycle. Intent is something we cannot prove from television. But look at the pattern from Debby's side. There is conflict. Debby becomes uncertain. She starts fearing the relationship could fall apart. Then Mido gives her a dramatic gesture or emotional reassurance. Debby feels enormous relief. And that relief becomes evidence that everything is okay again. That cycle matters because relief is powerful. When you genuinely believe you are about to lose somebody and then suddenly receive exactly the commitment you thought you might never get, the emotional high can be so strong that you stop thinking about how painful the road was. You become focused on the destination. And I wonder whether Debby sometimes measures this relationship by how good she feels after the crisis, instead of asking why the crisis became so emotionally intense in the first place. That is the part I would be watching after the wedding. Because marriages are not built around dramatic proposals or emotional dinners. Marriage happens during the boring moments. It is the random Tuesday when nobody is proposing, nobody is crying, nobody thinks anyone is leaving, and there is no giant romantic gesture waiting at the end of the argument. Can Debby and Mido communicate then? Can Debby ask for reassurance without Mido becoming frustrated that she needs it? Can Mido express independence without Debby immediately wondering whether he is pulling away from her? Can they disagree without every argument feeling like a threat to the entire relationship? If they can do that, then maybe episode 14 really is the beginning of something healthier. But right now, we have a wedding tomorrow, and not enough time to know whether this new piece is permanent. And then Debby goes to see her friends. This is where I think the episode becomes even more revealing. Debby tells these women that everything has been going incredibly well. The fighting has stopped. Things feel smooth. Mido finally told her he loves her. Then she flashes the ring. And then comes the part her friends clearly were not prepared for. The wedding is tomorrow. Think about what this sounds like from their perspective. Their last major experience with Mido was a confrontation bad enough that they walked away deeply concerned about Debby's relationship. They probably thought Debby would eventually start asking the same questions they were asking. Instead, she returns with an engagement ring, tells them everything has changed, and announces that she will be married within hours. And before they can even process that, they realize they are not invited. That is where the storyline stops being only about Mido and Debby. Now it becomes about what happens to Debby's support system when the people around her do not support the relationship strongly enough. There are two ways to interpret this. and I think both deserve to be taken seriously. The first possibility is completely reasonable. Maybe Debby simply wants a peaceful wedding. Her friends and Mido obviously do not get along. If she knows putting everybody together will turn a small ceremony into another argument, keeping things family only may be the smartest decision she can make. Your friends do not automatically have a right to attend your wedding just because they care about you. Debby is an adult. She gets to choose the guest list. But the second interpretation is why so many viewers are uncomfortable. What if the relationship seems more peaceful, partly because the people who challenge it are being kept farther away? That is where the line between boundaries and isolation becomes worth discussing. A healthy boundary sounds like, you don't need to agree with my relationship, but you do need to respect my choice. A much more concerning pattern would be, anybody who questions my relationship loses access to me. I am not saying that second version is definitely what Debby is doing. We do not have enough evidence for that. But it is understandable why viewers are asking the question, because these are not strangers who randomly criticized Mido online. These are Debby's friends. They were important enough for her to involve in her life, talk about the relationship with, and meet after the engagement. Yet when the actual wedding arrives, they are outside the circle. And here's what makes this complicated. Sometimes friends are wrong. Sometimes your friends meet someone during one terrible night, form an opinion, and never allow that person to grow beyond the first impression. Maybe the Halloween blow-up became so defining that Mido felt there was no way to recover. Maybe Debby's friends have crossed the line from concern into interference. That absolutely happens. But sometimes the people outside a relationship can also see things more clearly precisely because they are not emotionally dependent on the outcome. Debby wants Mido to be the right person. Her friends do not need him to be. So Debby sees a proposal and feels commitment. Her friends may see unresolved problems underneath the proposal. Debby hears "I love you" and feels secure. Her friends may remember how difficult it was for her to get those words in the first place. Debby sees Mido being affectionate and thinks he has changed. Her friends may be wondering whether a few peaceful days are enough evidence. That does not automatically make them enemies of Debby's happiness. Sometimes the person asking the uncomfortable question is the person trying to protect you. The hard part is knowing when protection becomes control. What really stood out to me was how quickly Debby's friends seemed to realize they were not changing her mind. They did not launch another massive intervention. They did not spend the entire conversation begging her not to marry him. It felt more like they understood Debby had already made the decision, whether they agreed with it or not. And once friends reach that point, something has changed. They are no longer trying to influence the choice. They are watching the choice happen. That does not mean their concerns disappeared. It means they know they no longer have much influence. But there is one person Debby cannot simply push to the edge of the wedding conversation. Her son, Caden. And I actually think Caden could become more important to the storyline than Debby's friends. Debby describes him as protective, and his presence clearly matters. When she gets the message that he may have to work on the wedding day, she immediately panics. Suddenly, a wedding that seemed unstoppable has a condition. If Kaden cannot be there, Debby says she does not really see a wedding happening. That is a huge statement, but it also creates another contradiction. If Kaden's presence matters so much that his absence could stop the wedding, why has he never met Mido before his mother is about to marry him? That is unusual enough to deserve a real conversation. I am not suggesting some sinister explanation. Kaden is an adult. Adults have jobs, school, responsibilities, schedules, and their own lives. There may be very ordinary reasons why the meeting never happened earlier, but emotionally, the timing is still significant. He is not meeting his mother's boyfriend. He is meeting her future husband. There is almost no adjustment period between introduction and marriage. No months of watching Mido and Debby together. No gradual chance to form his own opinion. No time for Mido and Kaden to build trust. The wedding is already here, and we already know from the publicly released preview that Kaden is going to ask Mido some serious questions about his acting ambitions. That is where this storyline could get much more interesting. Because Hollywood has never just been a cute side dream for Mido. It connects directly to one of the biggest questions surrounding his relationship with Debby. What does Mido actually imagine his American life looking like? We know he wants acting opportunities. We know Hollywood has been part of his conversation. And Debby has questioned where those ambitions fit into their relationship. Now, there is a lazy way to talk about that. The lazy version would be, Mido wants Hollywood, so obviously he is using Debby. There is no evidence that proves that. People are allowed to have dreams and still love their partners. Moving to another country does not mean Mido should suddenly stop caring about his career. If acting has always mattered to him, wanting to pursue it does not automatically make his relationship suspicious. But Kaden does not need to accuse Mido of using his mother to ask some very practical questions. How realistic is the plan? Where does Debby fit into it? Who is paying while Mido tries to build that career? Does he expect Debby to move? Does he believe New Orleans is temporary? How long is he prepared to pursue acting before adjusting the plan? And what happens if the American dream looks nothing like the version Mido imagined? Those questions are not attacks. They are marriage questions. Hollywood is not only about fame. It is a location issue. It is a money issue. It is a lifestyle issue. It is a work issue. Eventually, it can become a priority issue. Debby may imagine that once they marry, Mido will settle into a stable life with her. Mido may imagine marriage as the beginning of the American chapter where he can finally chase his professional dream. Those two futures can exist together, but only if Debby and Mido are imagining roughly the same future. That is what I would want Kaden to ask. Not, do you really love my mother? Anybody can answer yes. I would want to know what Mido's plan looks like when love has to compete with money, work, geography, and ambition. That is where commitment becomes real. And that brings us right back to why the speed of this wedding matters. A fast wedding is not automatically a bad wedding. This franchise revolves around couples dealing with immigration deadlines, visas, and circumstances that are very different from an ordinary dating relationship. Sometimes couples simply do not have the luxury of endlessly delaying everything. But when the relationship already contains questions about trust, careers, family acceptance, and emotional compatibility, moving quickly removes one thing you cannot replace later. Time. Time is what tells you whether somebody changed or simply had a good week. Anybody can become more affectionate after an engagement. Anybody can behave differently immediately before a wedding. Anybody can make a big promise during an emotional moment. Consistency is what tells you whether that behavior becomes normal. Debby feels good right now. Mido proposed. He told her he loves her. They are not fighting. The wedding is tomorrow. For Debby, those 4 things may feel like all the proof she needs, but viewers are carrying the entire season into this wedding. And that is why fan reaction has been so divided. Some fans feel Debby wants this happy ending so badly that she is minimizing problems that once made her deeply uncomfortable. That is fan interpretation, not confirmed fact, but it makes sense why viewers see it that way. Other viewers have a very different reaction. They think Debby is 55 years old, she knows Mido better than people watching edited television scenes, and her friends need to accept that they do not get to choose her husband. And honestly, that argument deserves respect too. Reality television gives us fragments. Producers show conflict because conflict makes television. It is entirely possible Debby and Mido have had hours of calm, loving conversations that viewers never saw. Maybe there is more stability behind the scenes than the edit suggests. But I also do not think the show is edited should become an excuse to ignore everything that actually happened on the show. We watched Debby question Mido's commitment. We watched her struggle to get emotional reassurance. We watched Mido collide with her friends. We watched Hollywood become part of their trust conversation. We watched Debby experience relationship moments where she was not sure where Mido stood. So fans did not invent those issues. They are responding to patterns the season itself presented. Another fan theory circulating is that Debby's friends were not invited specifically because Mido refused to have them there. That has not been confirmed. Debby may have independently decided to have a tiny family-only wedding, so that theory should stay exactly where it belongs, in the fan opinion category. But the reason the theory exists is obvious. Mido clashes with Debby's friends, and when the wedding arrives, the friends disappear from the guest list. People are naturally going to connect those two events, even when they do not have proof. And I think Debby could answer a lot of these questions by explaining something much more important than whether things are great now. Tell us what actually changed. What did Mido understand about Debby's emotional needs that he did not understand before? What did Debby realize about Mido? How did they resolve the friend conflict? What compromises have they made around Hollywood? What happens financially if acting does not work immediately? What happens during their next major disagreement? What happens when Debby feels insecure again? Those answers would convince me much more than a ring. The ring proves they are committed to getting married. It does not prove they are prepared for marriage. And if you look back across their season, that distinction becomes impossible to ignore. This relationship has moved through one huge emotional moment after another. Ghosting, conflict around the move, attempts to repair things, the Halloween disaster, more emotional uncertainty, the proposal surprise, the I love you. Now the wedding. Their relationship keeps moving from peak to peak, but marriages do not live on the peaks. They live in the space between them. That is where I want to see Mido and Debby next. Can Mido reassure Debby without making her feel ridiculous for needing reassurance? Can Debby trust Mido without asking him to prove the relationship again after every conflict? Can Mido pursue acting without Debby wondering whether she was simply part of his route to America? Can Debby support his ambition without sacrificing the life she wants for herself? Can Mido coexist with the people Debby loves when those people are skeptical of him? Can Debby's family ask legitimate questions without Debby hearing every concern as an attack on her relationship? None of those problems disappear because they exchange vows. If anything, marriage makes those questions harder because now their lives are even more connected. There is also another possibility that deserves more attention. Maybe Mido and Debby are not fighting about how much they love each other. Maybe they are fighting because they express love in completely different ways. Debby appears to need verbal confirmation. She wants to hear the words. Mido often appears to put more weight on actions and major gestures. So Debby asks, "Are you happy?" Mido thinks, "I proposed to you. How could you not know?" Debby hears that and thinks, why can't you just answer the question? He feels like his actions already proved his feelings. She feels like he is avoiding emotional intimacy. Both leave the conversation frustrated, even though both may genuinely care. That type of mismatch can absolutely be fixed. But it only gets fixed when both people stop arguing that their own style should automatically be enough for the other person. Debby cannot expect Mido to perform constant reassurance every time she feels uncertain. At some point, if Mido is consistently showing commitment, Debby has to decide whether she trusts him. But Mido also cannot know verbal affection matters deeply to Debby and then act like saying a few basic loving words is some unreasonable burden. Compromise means both people move. That is why I would not place all responsibility on Mido. Debby has work to do too. A relationship cannot survive forever if one person is repeatedly asked to prove the same love after every disagreement. Eventually, reassurance needs to become trust. Maybe that is exactly what is happening now. Maybe the proposal and the I love you finally gave Debby enough confidence to stop questioning Mido every time something feels uncertain. If that is true, episode 14 could genuinely represent a healthier turning point. But we are not going to know because of the wedding. We are going to know because of what happens after it. Consistency after the cameras move away from the ceremony. Consistency when Hollywood becomes a real conversation. Consistency when Kaden asks something Mido does not want to hear. Consistency when Debby's friends are still around. Consistency when the next disagreement happens and there is no engagement ring waiting at the end of it. That is why the upcoming wedding surprise also catches my attention. We know there has been a future tease involving some kind of wedding surprise. I am not going to guess what that surprise is because there is no point inventing drama when this relationship already has enough real tension. But Mido and surprises already have history. And Debby clearly enjoys romance while also struggling badly with uncertainty. Those are not the same thing. Surprising your partner can be romantic. Making your partner genuinely believe the relationship is falling apart before revealing the romantic part can hit very differently. So whatever happens next, I would be watching whether Mido has actually learned which type of surprise Debby can emotionally enjoy. And then there is Caden. I think his conversation with Mido could reveal more about this relationship than the wedding ceremony itself. Debby's friends can be left off a guest list. Her son is different. If Caden challenges Mido's acting plans, Debby will once again find herself between Mido and someone she loves. What she does in that moment matters. Does she allow Caden to ask difficult questions? Does she immediately become defensive? Does Mido Mido calmly explain himself? Does he treat skepticism as disrespect? Because anybody can be romantic toward the person they are trying to marry. A much harder test is how you behave around that person's family when they do not automatically trust you. If Mido can sit with Kaden, explain the career plan, acknowledge why a son might be protective of his mother, and remain respectful even when he disagrees, that would tell me much more about his maturity than another dramatic romantic speech. But if every question becomes an insult and every skeptical family member becomes somebody who needs to be pushed away, then Debby may eventually realize the friend conflict was not an isolated incident. And financially, the acting dream is going to become impossible to avoid. Dreams cost money. Moving costs money. Auditions cost time. Trying to build an entertainment career can mean long periods without predictable income. Building a life in a new country already comes with financial pressure before you add Hollywood to the equation. Marriage means those individual dreams eventually enter the same household budget. That is when romance becomes negotiation. Debby may think she is marrying a man who will settle into a life with her. Mido may think he is marrying the woman he loves while finally getting a real chance to pursue the career he has wanted. Again, those things are not automatically incompatible. But somebody has to answer what happens when they conflict. If an opportunity pulls Mido toward another city, what happens? If pursuing acting becomes expensive, how long do they support it? If Debby does not want to relocate, whose dream changes? If Mido's career does not develop the way he expects, does he adjust or become resentful? That is where I think the real post-wedding conflict could come from, not another random fight. Expectations: Debby expects emotional security. Mido expects room to pursue his goals. Debby's family may expect Mido to prove his intentions. Mido may expect those people to respect the fact that Debby already chose him. Debby's friends may expect her eventually to recognize the concerns they raised. Debby expects those friends to support her, regardless of whether they approve. Everybody is entering this marriage with a different idea of what should happen next. That is a lot of pressure for a couple that only recently looked emotionally unstable. I could easily see Kaden becoming the new outside voice, asking the same practical questions the friends were asking before. I could also see Hollywood moving from an abstract dream into a real marital issue. The second Mido starts seriously talking about moving, auditions, expenses, or changing their lifestyle around his career, Debby's old fear could come right back. Is she the priority, or is America still part of the dream? Again, that does not mean they are doomed. There is another possible outcome. Marriage may give Debby enough security that she stops interpreting Mido's ambitions as proof that he values America more than her. If she genuinely trusts the commitment, perhaps she can finally support his career without constantly wondering what it means for the relationship. That would be real progress. But the opposite possibility exists too. Maybe the wedding temporarily quiets problems that return the moment real life starts. That is why I cannot watch episode 14 and declare that everything is fixed. I can say Mido gave Debby something emotionally important. I can say Debby looks genuinely happy. I can say they appear calmer than they did during some of their worst moments. But those things are not the same as saying every concern has disappeared. If anything, the wedding makes the concerns more important. Debby has the proposal. She has the I love you. She has the ring. She has a wedding date. What we still do not know is whether she finally has the consistency she has been asking Mido for throughout this relationship. And maybe that is the only question that really matters now. Anybody can change for one romantic evening. Anybody can make a huge gesture when the relationship reaches a breaking point. Anybody can behave differently immediately before a wedding. Marriage asks whether that new behavior survives when the emotional moment is gone. So I don't think viewers have to choose between two extreme explanations. You do not have to believe Mido is secretly using Debby. And you do not have to believe Debby's friends are bitter outsiders who know absolutely nothing. There is a much more realistic middle ground. Mido may genuinely love Debby and still have serious growing to do. Debby may genuinely understand Mido better than viewers do and still be moving faster than the evidence supports. Her friends may genuinely care about her and sometimes overstep. Mido may have legitimate reasons for not wanting people who openly distrust him at an intimate wedding. Caden's questions may be uncomfortable and still be exactly the questions this couple needs to answer. All of that can be true at the same time. Real relationships are usually far messier than one perfect victim and one perfect villain. But there is one thing Debby needs to understand going into this wedding. The ceremony does not settle the argument about whether Mido changed. It starts the period where he has to show that change consistently. And Mido needs to understand something equally important. Debby's need for emotional security is not going to disappear because he finally said I love you once. If he wants this marriage to work, he has to learn how to reassure her without becoming irritated every time she needs connection. At the same time, Debby has to stop treating every affectionate gesture like proof that the entire relationship has suddenly transformed. Real security is usually much quieter than that. It is not a dramatic proposal. It is not a perfect dinner. It is not one emotional declaration. It is months and years of somebody behaving consistently enough that you no longer need the grand proof. Maybe Debby and Mido can get there. Maybe this wedding really is their turning point. But episode 14 has not proven that yet. What episode 14 has shown us is that Debby believes it has. Now the relationship has to catch up to that belief. So where do you stand? Do you think Mido has genuinely changed and Debby is finally getting the version of him she believed was there all along? Or do you think Debby is treating the proposal, one long-awaited I love you, and a few peaceful days as proof that months of unresolved problems are suddenly gone? And when Kaden finally sits across from Mido and starts asking the practical questions about Hollywood, money, and what his future with Debby actually looks like, whose reaction will tell you more about this marriage? Mido's response to being questioned, or Debby's response when someone she loves questions him?